Welcome to the spring campus update, like no campus update we've ever had before. I was thinking about today and thinking back if we had done a campus update in January. That was a time when we were on that continuing upward trend for the university. We had pretty good optimism about the state budget. Enrollment numbers were strong. We finally have a student success center going up to help with our classroom challenges. A bond issue was before the public. Hopefully that would bring another big classroom building to the campus. Lots of reasons to be optimistic about where we were and where we were headed. Then of course, COVID-19 occurred. And just think, it was only 8 weeks ago that we decided to move all of our final exams to a remote format. 7 weeks ago we did it. 3,000 classes transitioned in a week. 5 weeks ago, we started the quarter. We've been through a pretty hectic beginning to our management of our response to COVID. And now we're kind of settling into the middle of that response. We have things in place to manage through the period, hopefully shorter, not longer, but we're set. And like any long process, it's time to start looking forward. A great analogy is a marathon. You out of the chute hard, kind of watching the competition, then you settle into the middle of the race. And the middle is where you win or lose it, actually. If you fail in the middle, you won't be ready for that kick at the end, it won't matter. But you don't know what the end's gonna look like, but you press on. And that's kind of where we are right now with COVID. We've gotten through the out of the blocks, we didn't get knocked down during the firing of the gun, and we've got a sense of our pace and our rhythm and where we're going. We don't know what the end's gonna look like. But now's the time to get the work done, to kind of keep at it and make sure that UCR stays strong. And so it's great to be here now at this point in the quarter, not January when life was kind of blissful by comparison, and not March where our life was pretty hectic, but now in the middle, where we're back to being a campus, back to being a university, and back to getting things done. Now this format doesn't allow for the same kind of interchange that I look forward to at our regular updates, where there's questions from the floor and mics being passed around the room. Instead, I appreciate everyone who took the time to send in some questions. I've had a chance during the last few weeks to stop into lots of different venues, faculty meetings, staff meetings, classrooms, talk with lots of people, and I get a lot of the similar kinds of questions that we're going to talk about today. These are the ones that have come in large measure by email, and I thought we sifted through to get the ones that were most frequent and I hope most helpful to everyone to get a sense of where we are as a university. So with that, I think we'll turn to questions. So first question is the university budget, and what does it look like and what is it going to look like in this COVID-19 world? Let me give you a little bit of context. UCR's budget is about $1 billion a year, and it's almost half and half. Half of it is auxiliary enterprises, and those are enterprises that have to operate based on their own revenue, and that includes housing, dining, parking, a host of kind of services. And they have to operate on their own revenue so that we're not unfairly competing with the private sector. And that's about $500 million. There's also another half of the budget that we call the core operating budget. And that's about $500 million. And that's the piece that runs what people think of as a university. It's the classes, it's the professors, it's the teachers, it's a lot of the infrastructure, it's what cuts the grass and buys gas for the vehicles and the rest. The $500 million that is the core budget has two components that are also about half and half. Half tuition and half state support. So think now of the total budget, $1 billion, about a quarter of it is from the state, and about a quarter of it is from students. In this core budget piece, we now have to think about the revenue and support for the future. We are looking very carefully and working very hard at recruiting the best possible class of students for next year we can, both because the students are what help make our university great, but also because we need them to pay tuition and support the university. And we're tracking pretty well on enrollment, but we really won't know about enrollment until we get closer to the fall. And as many of you know, every family is thinking about what their family can and should do in the fall. So there's a lot of uncertainty on that half of the core budget. The other half comes from the state. And if you've been reading the paper, you know the challenges the state faces. Tax revenue is about to go very far down, and with that, limits in what the state can do. And just about every part of the state is suffering right now, whether it's private industry or K-12 education or certainly healthcare. So there's a lot of demand on what we believe to be a shrinking part of that state revenue. So that half is one to be worried about. The other half, the auxiliary half, similarly, we need to worry about it. One of the biggest parts of that auxiliary enterprise is housing and dining. We still have some students living on campus. We have some people for whom this is their only home, but most of the students have left. And with that, we've, of course, refunded their housing and dining fees. But we've also committed to trying to keep people employed, and we've committed to keeping everybody employed through at least this fiscal year. So that's a lot of people who are being paid without a revenue stream to support them. And as we look forward to the fall and beyond, if COVID continues to dominate our activities, it's quite likely that many of those residence hall rooms will remain vacant. And that's a huge amount of lost revenue. And again, this part of the budget has to function based on its own revenue. So both halves are in peril right now. Both have been affected. We estimate that spring quarter alone is about a $50 million budget cut between lost revenue and additional expenses to UCR. And you can run that out. It's $50 million in a spring quarter. It's somewhere between $100 and $150 million per year is what we are facing as a budget shortfall. And so people have asked me, so what keeps you up at night, Kim? And I always say it's the budget future and how we're going to manage this as a community. I've gotten a lot of questions over the last few weeks, particularly from students, about refunds. And so let me give you a little sense of where we are in the refund mode. Students, of course, pay tuition and a university fee that is tagged to tuition that helps to operate the university. It's that quarter of the budget I just talked about a moment ago. We continue to provide courses in the most effective ways that we can, and so that tuition remains in place, and we're collecting it in the same way we always have. There's also a host of other kinds of fees that students are asked to pay. So there's a number of late fees, late registration fee, late library fees. We're all familiar with those. We've essentially either eliminated or greatly delayed all of those fees. Students pay a number of different kinds of course fees. There are 280, I believe, individual course fees on campus. So for instance, if you're in a chemistry lab, you pay a fee for the chemicals and the glassware and things. In this quarter, all but 8 of those have been rescinded. So students are paying almost none of the course fees this quarter. The students, as I mentioned, students who moved out of the residence halls, we refunded all their housing and dining fees for the quarter. There remain some fees we're still working on, and those are more complex fees. I'll use the Student Rec Center fee as a good example because that's one that people have asked about, and it's a larger fee. The Rec Center fee does several things. One, it pays essentially the mortgage on the facilities that we have. And the students several years ago agreed to pay that to build these facilities, and the facilities have to be sustained, and we have to continue to pay the mortgage on those buildings. So part of that fee is committed, and we can't really refund it because it's already been spent. A part of the fees are for programming, and we're doing some programming. We're doing yoga classes online and some other things online. But a lot of the programming we simply can't do with the building closed. And so we're trying right now to go through that and lots of other fees and identify which portions we really the dollars have already been expended and which parts we can return. And hopefully we'll be back with a student shortly on that piece. A lot of people have asked about their own employment situation going forward. And again, we're kind of in the middle, so it's hard to know exactly. But I can tell you this, our billion-dollar campus budget is primarily comprised of salaries and benefits. We spend 85% of our budget or more on salaries and benefits. And when you think about that, all the grass that gets to be cut and all the gas and all the heat and all the lights and all the travel and all the other things, we're still by far and away driven by salaries and benefits on the expenditure side. So to manage through this, we have to think carefully about our revenue and about our expenditures, and that implies, what about salaries and benefits? I've been meeting regularly with lots of people on campus and lots of people across the system. The 10 chancellors have met, I wouldn't want to guess, 30, 40 times since COVID started. Talking about lots of things, including, of course, how do we best support our staff and faculty members through this, particularly in terms of continuing salary support. But I have to be honest, there are lots of things being discussed. Furloughs, which was a strategy that was used in 2008, 2009 by the university to manage through that budget challenge. There's been talk about layoffs, but the layoffs, of course, would have to be negotiated with the unions for all represented staff, and we'd have to think carefully about what that would mean for individual employees. Certainly none of these are things we want to do, layoffs included. There's only so many strategies here, and I wish I could tell you more right now about which ones are most likely and for whom they might be affecting, but right now I really don't know. Pretty much all options are on the table. I've been listening around the campus to the kinds of concerns that people have and the kinds of options that they think would be most appealing, and certainly always looking forward to people sending those in to me. A lot of people want to know about fall quarter, and so do I. It's so hard to know. If you think back, again, just a few weeks ago, we were just bubbling along, having classes and running the campus as we always were, and now look. So it's awfully hard to know what's going to happen in another 2, 3, 4 months. I can tell you, you're probably reading a lot in the paper about other universities and their plans and statements. We have an advantage over most universities in the country. Most universities are on the semester system, and classes start mid-late August. Our classes really don't start till almost the beginning of October, so we have a little more time. I'm not saying we want to use all that time, but we have a little bit more breathing room here. And I'm guessing a lot of things will happen between now and September, October. If I were going to bet, if I were going to guess, I'd be much more likely to bet that we'll still be doing most of our instruction remotely in the fall. I'm hopeful that's not the case, but I'm trying to be realistic. I'm a little more optimistic that we can ramp up some other activities on campus. So for instance, research programs and graduate education. Those are smaller in terms of numbers of people. The people are generally spread out. Their activities are more organized by group. So it isn't an undergraduate student who goes to math class, chemistry class, philosophy class, and English class, and then meets students from all other majors in there. Generally, the graduate students stay together by topic and by major, and that makes it a little easier to isolate and manage distancing. But that's just a lot of surmising. I wish I knew an answer to what the fall quarter was going to look like. The COVID-19 reality has reminded us of all the parts of a university. One of the parts is our faculty colleagues and their important work to assure their career continuance. And for faculty members, that means regular merit review programs and promotion programs, the rest. And they need to keep their scholarship alive. And we have a system for that actually defines how many years you spend working on different parts of this progression. We have, and this is the Faculty Senate and the Vice Provost for Academic Personnel, have already extended that time window, particularly for pre-tenure faculty members. All you have to do is just ask, and the tenure clock will be extended for another year for anybody and everybody who wants it. I guess the good news is that is pretty much true across the country, that this aberrancy in academic progression is going to be seen as just that, an aberrancy, and people are going to adjust to it. But the clock is stoppable. Lots of people have asked about grading systems. Are we going to go pass-fail for the fall for everybody? That isn't my decision necessarily. It's more a Faculty Senate decision. As I think most people know, we've gone to a pass, no credit option for the spring that's largely a faculty member option as a way of kind of managing the differences between class experiences. I know that the Faculty Senate continues to discuss that along with lots of other things. in preparation for decisions for the fall. We're a big university with lots of moving parts. And it's easy for particularly people who aren't familiar with the university to understand that we've now moved our instruction to a remote form. But they oftentimes forget about the research enterprise, which is fundamental to a research university. We wouldn't have much to teach if we didn't do research to inform it. And under COVID and under the public health orders, we're supposed to eliminate as many people on campus as we can and separate them as far as we can, which implies, and most of our research activity has ground almost to a halt. There's certainly some work. If you're an independent scholar, you can do a lot of your work online, and you can do it from your home even. And we have people still working in the agricultural fields in Coachella Valley and doing work. But most of the on-campus research has been stopped. That doesn't mean that we don't have research activity of some types. And in particular, we have to keep the facilities working. We have laboratory animals that have to be tended to. So we have people on campus to keep the research infrastructure going. But much of the research has ground to a halt. As you know, much of that research is funded particularly by the federal government. We're optimistic that the federal government, the federal agencies, will understand the national reality and extend our funding in creative ways as this pandemic moves on. But right now we're still uncertain about exactly what that will mean. So there's a lot of really very understandable angst among faculty members and graduate students and research associates and the rest about what the future will look like in terms of funding and how to make the lifeblood of the university really vibrant again. I've had a couple of people say, how come we're doing all this construction if we're supposed to be socially distanced, number one, and we're worried about finances, number two? Well, let me cover both of those. We've worked with the contractors on campus. They are working closely with their subcontractors and other groups to do as much social distancing as they can. I just drove by, first time I've driven on campus in maybe a month. I just drove by a construction site. Every employee's got a face mask on and they're working on different parts of the building. So I feel good about that kind of health and safety piece. The finance piece is one that is also interesting, I guess, to think about. If you think of deciding to build a house, you buy a lot, you hire an architect, you pay for a lot of zoning and planning and permitting, then you start the construction. For many people, they actually take out a mortgage to do this. And that's kind of what we have here. We don't take out a mortgage, we actually sell bonds, but we accrue debt. And now we're building the building. Well, you've probably seen situations where somebody couldn't afford to finish building the house. They defaulted on their mortgage, they walked away, and there's a half-finished building sitting on a lot somewhere. And the individuals, sorry to say, have now ruined their credit, and the building sits empty until a bank decides to finish it or something else happens. Well, if you think about that in a university sense, we don't want to walk away from a building that's half done. It's not on a lot someplace, it's in the middle of our campus, number one. But number two, we've already paid for the architect, the planning, a lot. We got millions of dollars in most of these buildings already, tens of millions of dollars. And we're going to be responsible for the debt. And if UCR ruins its debt or its credit ratings, we're going to have a lot of problems for a long time. So it's just much more cost effective. We're already committed to paying this anyway to proceed with the construction. If there's an upside, the construction is going on now without a lot of people around. So the disruptions to traffic as we move equipment in and out and move materials in and out is a little minimized. And if there's a real bright spot, construction continues on the parking garage behind Chemical Sciences. Pretty much all that construction to date has been with heavy equipment, which means individuals are actually in separate vehicles, bulldozers and caterpillars and the rest. So that crew remains safe. There's no doubt COVID-19 has been a disruptor of pretty much everything around the world, but certainly here at UCR. We're doing a lot of things differently and thinking differently about an awful lot. Some have asked me, so what about the strategic plan? We started that here several months ago, and are we going to stop it? My response is no. If there was ever a time to be thinking about a strategy, now is the time. We know that the future is going to look different. We can't predict exactly how, but we got to be well prepared to think about our priorities. This pandemic, I think, has helped us think about what's important in our family life, in our professional life, in our institution's life. And so I'm keen. We've slowed down the planning processes to allow all the working groups time to think about the future. But I'm really keen for this conversation to continue. Now informed by a pandemic. Just think if we had finished our planning 2 years ago without having any knowledge this was going to happen, this would have maybe not been very compatible with whatever plans we had. Now we at least have the opportunity to use this as informing that plan. So I'm keen not just for our formal planning processes to move forward, but for everybody to think about their world and think about how the world has changed and how it may continue to change, whether that's in terms of remote instruction or working from home or relationships with colleagues, things that are important that we didn't really appreciate their importance before, and things that aren't so important that we kind of took for granted and always did, but we don't do it. We're not doing it now, and it doesn't matter that much. A whole host, dozens, thousands, tens of thousands of individual decisions, I think, will help us make the most of this disruptor in our lives. It's going to take everybody for UCR to be its best. And so what I would ask, if you have an idea about how to save some money, how to make some money, how to think differently about our future, please send along. Or if you have suggestions about anything, advice or criticism, send those along. It would be naive to think that I can solve these problems. Be naive to think the vice chancellors can solve all these problems, it's going to take everybody. And I really am sincere, and that's why I appreciate so much people sending along some of these questions ahead of time. I'm sincere about, please send along suggestions. I'm not saying we'll be able to act on every one, but we're going to consider every one, because we have to make sure we have all the best ideas if we're going to be our best going forward. With all the disruptions from COVID-19, some things sustain. And one of those things for me is my pride in this university. It's been unbelievable to watch how everyone has changed how they operate for the betterment of all. And I just want to say, if nothing else in this update, thank you. Thank you, each and every person. A student who's managing to stay in class, sitting on their bed with their brothers and sisters running around. Instructors who are staying up late at night to figure out how to make sure the technology works the next day. To people right now on campus, in the police department, in the physical plant, keeping the university physically intact. Just thanks to everybody. There's no doubt we're going to come through this pandemic, and I have no doubt we're going to be stronger for it, and that's because of all of you. Thank you.